One.
Hello, my name is Tiffany Mason, and this is my Teacher Leader Capstone presentation. For my Action Research project, I've been working on closing the achievement gap for African American students on K-Prep. I teach at Mayfield Elementary, and earlier this school year, we met as a team to look at the 2017-2018 K-Prep scores. When looking at this new data, we saw a large gap in our math scores, specifically with our African American students. This gap showed that our African American students were performing much lower than their Caucasian peers in math on K-Prep. Later that fall, we met as a team again to look at the STAR math scores for the school, and it also showed that our African American students were performing much lower than their Caucasian peers in math. As a school, we decided something had to be done and urgent. Administration asked third grade teachers to select 18 to 20 students to participate in a tutoring group. These students needed to be someone that would benefit from urgent intervention. They had to be performing below grade level and were not at benchmark. This is where my tutoring group originated from. I do teach at Mayfield Elementary, which is a very large and diverse school with a large number of African American students and students of two or more races. My school is a Title I school. All students do receive free lunch and breakfast. For my tutoring program, I had 90 minutes dedicated to my tutoring group every Wednesday. During this 90 minutes, I worked with my students in small groups and individually focusing just on math. Like I said earlier, the subgroup that I did specifically work with was African American students that fell in that subgroup according to K-Prep. They were all in the third grade, and they were all Tier 2 students. I had 11 females and 8 males. I do believe that there were many factors that influenced the low test scores and the large achievement gap. The research measurement that I used was the STAR test. And at my school, we STAR test 3 times a year, once in the fall, once in the winter, and once in the spring. In the next week, we're going to start doing our spring STAR testing, so I'm anxious to see the growth of these students. Tutoring ran from the first week of November to spring break. Last year I taught third grade and I did help with K-Prep tutoring, so I was familiar with some of the standards and the whole process of tutoring. For my research project, I partnered with both administrators in my school, Miss Dublin and Mrs. Dunn. Together, we looked at tutoring data, STAR data, and scrimmage data, which is our mock K-Prep that our school takes. I also partnered with the 2 third grade math teachers, Ms. Hargrove and Mr. Phelps, to plan my instruction and to check on the students' classroom growth. While conducting my research project, I did partner with the 2 fourth grade teachers, Ms. Ford and Ms. Leroy, mainly for resources and advice. Because I did work with my students in a tutoring group, I did work with the ESS tutoring coordinator, Mrs. Adams. She helped me gather materials and was a great asset to my research project. We've all heard the term achievement gap thousands of times when we meet at PLC, at faculty meetings, at PD, but what does it really mean? In the world of education, achievement gap refers to this discrepancy in academic performance between groups of students. Typically, achievement gap shows up in grades, standardized test scores, dropout rates, and many other measures. In many schools like myself, the term achievement gap is used to describe the troubling performance gap between subgroups such as ethnic groups. These students are usually at the lower end of the academic performance scale versus their Caucasian peers. Achievement gap is not something that just popped up out of nowhere. Achievement gap has been around for years, and it's been a persistent problem between our white and our minority students. Achievement gap usually does not just fade away. It's usually something that moves with our kids and it grows with them. All over the world, there are educators like myself who are trying to break down the barriers of achievement gaps by providing extra instruction and just equal educational opportunities. Achievement gaps in our ethnic groups have been a problem for years, ever since school desegregation, and there's been lots of large initiatives to help close this achievement gap. In 2001, we had the huge No Child Left Behind Act, and this was supposed to help us focus on just students' growth and their learning. But with No Child Left Behind, the focus really shifted because it was more testing, and with testing became more scores, and labeling and punishing schools started to happen. In 2015, Congress passed the Every Student Succeeds Act, and this was to improve the nation's public schools and to help close achievement gaps between different racial and ethnic groups. The Every Child Succeed Act has to identify schools every 3 years that are performing low, and it's required for schools to conduct a needs assessment, and this just helps get assistance and get resources that your school might need to help that academic achievement. For my research project, here is two of my data tables. On the left, you'll see the data table that's student 1 to 19. It has their race, the fall score, the winter score, and their growth or loss in points. The table on the right shows the cutoff scores for fall, winter, and spring. For STAR, this aligns with the K-Prep. So it tells you what you need to get novice, apprentice, proficient, or distinguished. And based off the benchmark scores for the winter testing window, 12 of my tutoring students were apprentice and 7 of my students were novice. This was not much change from the fall. I would love for all 19 of my students to be performing at a proficient level. That's what my school considers to be at benchmark. My results did show that my after-school tutoring time was beneficial for several students. 13 of 19 of my students did show growth and are still continuing to grow. 6 of my students did not show growth, but there was many factors to consider, frequent attendance issues and kids that have behavior problems that have been having to attend detention and not tutoring on Wednesdays. My African American students grew a total of 640 points, and 5 out of 15 of my African American students did not grow from the STAR test in the fall to winter. My 2 or more racist tutoring students grew a total of 140 points, and 1 of my 2 or more racist students did not grow from fall to winter. Those of us in education know that if we want to change, there has to be collaboration. There's so many benefits from having a collaboration. When a school and its staff work together to support learning, everyone truly benefits. Partner collaborations can strengthen support and even transform student learning. Like I said earlier, for my research project, I partnered with both administrators in my school, Ms. Dublin and Mrs. Dunn. I've been very blessed to work with them from the very beginning. They put their heart and soul in it, and they truly wanted to close this achievement gap and to break down the barriers. They worked with me on interpreting data and planning and just getting a game plan together. I did work with both third grade math teachers, Ms. Hargrove and Mr. Phelps. I do teach kindergarten, so they worked with me on becoming comfortable with the standards, sharing resources, and sharing classroom growth, and just giving their professional opinion. I did work with the 2 fourth grade math teachers. They shared resources, gave me different approaches to take with struggling math standards and target areas. And I did work with the ESS tutoring coordinator, Ms. Adams. She helped me gather materials and just organize my tutoring group. For my research project, I did use STAR and numerous formative assessments to progress monitor my tutoring students. At the beginning of my research project, I would always pick just one standard to focus on, and about a month then I realized I was doing it all wrong. I was not truly benefiting every child in my tutoring group. I then started to work with my administration and started planning for each child individually, and this is when I really started to see growth in my students, and I was seeing the numbers that I wanted to see is when I started planning for each child individually. For my research project, I met with Ms. Dublin and Ms. Dunn every 2 to 3 weeks to discuss data on my tutoring students. When I met with Ms. Dublin and Ms. Dunn, we looked at several different reports. In regards to STAR data, we looked at the STAR summary report, growth report, and instructional planning report. This is where I started to plan for my kids individually. I also brought in assessment data that I had collected. During each meeting, we put all of our focus on our 19 tutoring students. We discussed what we were doing right and what we could do better to help close the achievement gap with these students for the upcoming K-Prep test. In previous data meetings, we did conference with both third grade math teachers, Ms. Hargrove and Mr. Phelps, to get their opinion on students' performance in the math classroom. I'm very proud of my school and everyone that has contributed in this research project. There are so many benefits that are coming out of our collaboration. We are doing everything that we can to ensure that these students are well prepared for the K-Prep test. I have no doubts that these students will do their very best on the K-Prep test in a few weeks. I believe that all 19 of our tutoring students see the time and effort we have invested into them. I think they are truly doing their best to make us proud. And on this last page, you'll see my references that I used for my action research project.